Here's the timeline on LIV Golf. It's been going on for a number of years now. So January 2020, the format was proposed, a new Premier Golf League, 48 players, 12-man teams, 54-hole events with no cut and the shotgun start. Greg Norman, CEO. Then they start to recruit the big-name players. Remember, it was Dustin Johnson, followed by Phil Mickelson, then Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau. Those are all major champions. First LIV Golf event beginning. That was in London in 2022. And the PGA Tour suspended members who were competing there. So the battle was on. 11 LIV golfers then filing antitrust lawsuits against the PGA Tour. The Public Investment Fund, PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, in June of 2023 announced they would end all litigation, and they formed a new entity serving, they said, the best interests of all involved. Then Jon Rahm, in a bit of a shock, late in 2023, signed his big contract with LIV Golf, February of 2025. USGA and the R&A announcing exemptions into the U.S. Open and the Open. And then in September of a year ago, Greg Norman announced he was stepping away from LIV Golf. January of this year, Brooks Koepka, to great fanfare, rejoined the PGA Tour. We just heard Brooks there in South Carolina warming up. And then in February, LIV goes from 54 to 72 holes, and at the time seemed an important development. They were, for the first time, awarded official World Golf ranking points. And now here we are, according to the Financial Times, the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund on the verge of cutting support for LIV Golf. Joined now by Eamon Lynch and Damon Hack. Eamon, what's your sense of what's happening today?
Well, amid all of the rumours, we do actually have one fact to go on here, and it points to the fact that this is more of a public investment fund question than a LIV Golf question, because Yasser Al-Rumayyan today outlined a new 5-year spending plan for the Public Investment Fund, and he was very explicit that they're going to reprioritise domestic projects over international. Now, in real terms, that means he said 30% of the portfolio that's currently being spent on international projects will go to 20. That's about $100 billion less for international projects. So if you're getting into reprioritising your spending, then you'd have to wonder why you're spending money on a busload of washed-up golfers, which is really what they're doing. And it's very difficult to look at LIV and make an argument that this is something to keep investing in if you are reassessing, because there is no prospect of any profitability right now. It's one man's passion project, and it has a lifespan exactly as long as that man has runway to keep it going. And it sounds as though Al-Rumayyan's runway is shortening.
Damon, what's top of mind for you?
For me, one question that's been there from the very beginning is how financially viable could this product be under the weight of all those long-term contracts, not to mention operating costs inherent to a sports league, not to mention the fact there was no television contract as well. In the financial filings in the United Kingdom said the LIV UK arm lost over $1 billion from 2022 to 2024. But at the same time, there did seem to be a modicum of momentum in 2026. You look at the fact that LIV Golf received official World Golf ranking points at the beginning of February. Anthony Kim cutting through with a victory at LIV Golf Adelaide was a story that cut through professional golf. And then, of course, we saw the scenes in March in South Africa where over 100,000 fans, created the largest attended golf sporting event in the history of that country. Bryson DeChambeau telling a reporter who was on site, this may not work everywhere, but it can certainly work in some spots. Clearly, that is a question mark today.
Could funding potentially come from another source?
I don't think anyone's crazy enough to go down this road.
Money.
They are billions of dollars in the hole. There is no prospect of any kind of traction here. There's no audience traction. And Damon mentioned the crowds in South Africa. It's also unclear how many of those tickets were actually paid for. But if you look at their viewing figures, just in the UK market for that tournament, same time zone, no time zone difference at all, on TNT, which is smaller than Sky Sports over there, but not small in its entirety, it averaged less than 2,000 viewers for that tournament. There is no traction. There's no sponsors. It has no future. So the idea that somebody else might go in on the assumption that these team franchises will be worth something down the road seems awfully speculative.
If the funding is cut off, they will not have made it, not have been successful because, fill in the blank there. Why would you say they they will have missed if, in fact, this does go through?
A number of reasons. The American audience never really bought in. If you look at some head-to-head figures in the last year, it trailed some
But why?
PGA Tour events by
big
18
names,
times.
Damon, they had big names. They had Bryson DeChambeau. They had John Rahm.
Format, shotgun start, hard to follow. The team concept never really seemed to take hold. It was not a Ryder Cup or a President's Cup. And then the narrative has changed over the last couple of months with Brooks Koepka deciding to come back to the PGA Tour, with Patrick Reed sitting in a packed room on the DP World Tour and saying everyone knows that the best tour is the PGA Tour. The narrative has changed. There was no ultimate merger or deal between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. All of a sudden, the momentum had changed, big picture, from the PGA Tour being on its heels to the PGA Tour being the ultimate destination for the best players in the world.
I also think you factor in that, yeah, the product was not good at all for all the reasons that Damon's outlined. It's also difficult that to build something around players who aren't all that likable. And that's fundamentally the problem. That's why it was a loss to the PGA Tour. They took all of the engaging, polarizing, almost villain-type characters and went to LIV, but they didn't bring any white hats with them to LIV either. There wasn't exactly a compelling lineup of characters there, and I just think it was a lousy product played on lousy golf courses with players who are polarizing but not necessarily likable as well. I'd like to say that the morality issue was a part of it here, that people didn't appreciate the sports washing, but I'm not sure.
Let me just jump in. The fans in Adelaide would disagree with you. They would say that was a great product. Anthony Kim winning down there. The hundreds of thousands that you just talked about in South Africa would say, I think, that was a fun week. They had a great finish down there with Bryson DeChambeau winning.
Well, if you're trying to make a sports league solvent on the basis of selling tickets, you're already losing. It's a media rights business, and they don't have any. They've literally given away their media rights for as long as they've existed. All Adelaide and South Africa prove is where the rest of the golf tours have failed. There's savvy, golf-desperate, golf-hungry audiences around the world who aren't being served.
Just wonder if the narrative might have been different had the LIV golfers, by and large, performed better on the most important weeks of the year. We're coming off the first major championship of 2026. There was one LIV golfer out of 10 who even finished inside the top 30. That was Tyrrell Hatton, who had a T3 finish. Everybody else struggled mightily. Here are the numbers. I mean, John Rahm had one on LIV Golf, finishes T38. You had Bryson DeChambeau, who won twice going into the Masters tournament, missing the cut. This seemed to be the storyline month after month. You know, with a couple of exceptions. You had Brooks winning a PGA championship. Of course, Bryson did win a second U.S. Open as a member of LIV Golf. But by and large, the competitive sharpness of the LIV golfer on the most important weekends of the year seemed to be lacking.
Eamon, fair to say that the presence of LIV drove up the purses on the PGA Tour?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What that would be their lasting legacy is that they've warped the entire economy of the sport. It's a false economy that everyone else has had to keep pace with.
Would the PGA Tour now have a little bit of leverage with the players in terms of rising purses to say, hold on, guys, this is not sustainable any longer, knowing potentially there will not be a competitor on the landscape?
I think I would like to see that being the reality. I'm not sure Brian Rowlap, as their CEO, is going to go down that road, because the PGA Tour is essentially a player organisation. Whether or not the investors suddenly see the need to go down that road and try to pare things back. Because, I mean, they invested $1.5 billion that has not yet been spent, and that was the fund to protect themselves against the Saudis. If they get to the point where LIV is not a threat, then there's a valid question of whether or not all of this remaking of the tour that is being discussed, do they actually need that to the extent that they have previously? And I'm sure Brian Rowlap would argue they have, because he thinks they're doing this because they're not necessarily as a response to LIV, but because it needs to be done.
Why were they unable to make that framework agreement of 2023 work?
I wouldn't necessarily say it didn't work. It depends what you think it was intended to do. If you ask the people who were behind that, they would probably tell you that the fundamental goal was to stop the litigation that was costing them too much money and potentially risking discovery, unearthing some embarrassing secrets on either side of it. The idea that there was going to be some kind of deal after that, I think, might have been gravy on top. But I think the fundamental point of it was to end litigation. So from that aspect, it worked. Now, it backfired because it was a massive governance misstep, which ultimately cost Jay Monaghan a lot of support. Jimmy Dunn and Ed Hurley, the directors on the board with him who signed that framework agreement, eventually left the board of the PGA Tour, and the players gave themselves a built-in majority in perpetuity on the board because of the backlash to that. But I wouldn't think those guys think the framework agreement was entirely unsuccessful just simply because it did end that litigation.
And talking to some players who were in those meetings, some of them will tell you that they were close. They felt like there was some momentum for actually having these two, at one point, rival leagues come together, but they could not figure out the path forward, even if they thought there was going to be an ultimate cooling of tensions and it would be for the betterment of the game. If these two groups did come together, they just couldn't figure out a path to get there.
And John Rahm essentially ended those negotiations because he jumped 3 months after the framework agreement was signed, or 6 months after that, and that hardened opposition to a deal in the locker room because players did not want John Rahm coming back with his pockets full saying, I'm the hero who brought it all together.
Which legacies do you think took a hit as you look at the broad landscape of the last 5 years or so?
I start with Phil Mickelson, who I feel like could have and should have been a latter-day Arnold Palmer, a beloved figure in this game, a six-time major champ, the oldest, PGA champ, 3 green jackets, is immensely popular as anyone who's picked up 14 clubs. And he was really, in so many ways, the fire starter and the recruiter in the early days of LIV Golf.
And Phil's reputation never recovered from the comments, which he has never publicly disputed, to Alan Shipnuck, that he essentially was willing to accept murder and human rights abuses in return for leverage over the PGA Tour. I don't think anyone's ever torched his reputation faster and more effectively than Mickelson did. There's no surprises with Greg Norman. I mean, Greg was the obvious choice for them to run this initially because Greg was animated by animus towards the PGA Tour, a sense of personal grievance. And he's gone, driven out of it by LIV himself. But, if it does fall apart at this stage, it won't be the first time Greg's felt like a loser in the aftermath of the Masters. That's something he's quite familiar with at this point. But he's another reputation that will really have gone down the road of no return at this point.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. To recap, the Financial Times reported early this afternoon that Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund is on the verge of cutting its support for LIV Golf, with an announcement on the future of the league coming as soon as Thursday. We will continue to cover this story and update you with any new developments. But right now, it is back to 5 Clubs, hosted by Gary Williams, which was recorded earlier today.